Hello, everyone. We are back once again with another episode of the Young and Foolish podcast. And this week, as you'll see if you're watching the video version, that Raymond is not here with us, but we do have a very special guest here with us today. And before we get into who she is, we'll have her introduce herself for a little bit. I just want everyone to know that we brought her on to talk about the topic of urban forestry, which is something that I don't think Lorenzo and I really know too much about, but it's something that is definitely very interesting.
Not at all.
So before we get into the topic, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. So I'm Raquel. I'm also Lorenzo's sister. And I'm currently a first-year student in the urban forestry program at UBC. And I'm just really glad to be on here and happy to talk about urban forestry.
Awesome. So why don't you start off by telling us briefly what urban forestry is?
All right. So the way that it's most commonly referred to as is it's the art and science of the design and management of green spaces in urban settings. And the main goal of it is to maximize both the human and ecological benefits that green spaces provide for us in urban settings. Okay,
so this would be like an aspect of urban planning, essentially.
Yes, yeah. It kind of branches out into urban forestry is just kind of an umbrella term. There's lots of different things that you can go into it, but urban planning is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, with your program so far, what have you guys talked about? Because first year, obviously, it's gonna be more introduction stuff, and for the purpose of this podcast, including us, there's gonna be a lot of people who don't really know what urban forestry is all about. I think the brief description provided is awesome, but when we're talking about to get kind of a little bit deeper into it, what have you guys been talking about in the first year kind of introduction-based courses?
Well, let me see. Last semester, I guess it was I took the first introductory course, which was kind of touched on all the different little sectors of urban forestry. So there's a lot of different scales that you can look at it as. So it can be as small scale as just looking at arboriculture, for example. So just looking at the individual maintenance of single trees. It can also be as broad as urban planning, for example, what you said. So it's more looking at the grand picture, the bigger picture way of looking at things and planning out where parks are going to be. But just to dive into that a bit more, I guess we also talked about the governance that and all the different stakeholders and how that works out with urban planning and how it's kind of hard to talk about in a summarized way, but we just talked about the governance.
Where do the zoning laws come into this? Is that what the governance is, the zoning laws or whatever?
Yeah. So there's you have to look into whether first of all whether the land is publicly or privately owned. Then also looking at okay, well, what type of land is it? Is it is it in a residential sort of sector, or is it in an industrial zone? Commercial, there's a lot of things that play into it. And just looking at the best way to implement green space that makes the most sense, just because there are a lot of different stakeholders that want different things out of land, there's lots of conflicting interests. And so you just have to find a good way to balance everything. So for example, a lot of the issues that urban foresters run into is that a lot of the time people don't really see the value in green space in urban settings. So a lot of, you just have to kind of push back and fight against more developments that are happening. For example, a lot of the time there's parking lots and new buildings that are being built, and you have to just kind of fight back against that. But obviously in some areas maybe it would be better to have that, and it's just kind of finding the best balance for the area that you're in. And let me think what else we talked about. We talked about also there's also a lot of climate change issues that we've talked about. Just because as most people know, climate change is a very pressing issue. And for example, Vancouver by the year 2050 it's going to be just around like the same, it's going to have like this similar climate as San Diego. And so a lot of the native plants that we have here at the moment won't survive that. And so it's just like you run into a lot of issues with like, should we plant trees that are going to like adapt to that or adapted to that climate, or should we continue planting native plants? And then you just like run into a lot of issues with whether like you want to preserve like the like ecological integrity, or if you want to plan ahead for like climate change, you know. So it's just like there's like a lot of like different things I have to like weigh in.
Yeah,
so.
I think you touched on quite a few different aspects of urban forestry. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking is it's about the piece of land in like Richmond that for the longest time that just wasn't being used for anything. Even now, it's still just kind of like, I think they're trying to make a park, but you know, when you get off the highway and you go into Richmond, there's just this huge piece of land in the middle there. Like
with
on one side, you
are there
have
some gas stations nearby? Is it near Garden City?
Yeah, there's a gas station, the old one, and then there's a Garden City
like a dog
with the new
place.
mall. Yeah, there's a new mall on one side of it now. Yeah, with
mall?
like Bed Bath and Beyond, Walmart.
What? Where is this?
Yeah, Garden City.
What? Garden City has a mall now?
It's
Yeah,
not like a big
not
mall.
like
It's like yeah, it's like more just like a few. There's like grocery stores and like a few other things. It's not
Is
like
it even a mall if it doesn't get hooked up to the SkyTrain station, bro? Think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's got stores like that on one side. I mean, Bath and Beyond is pretty big, so it's not like a small mall, but it's not like a Richmond Center type mall. It's a different style. And then, obviously on the other side is the gas station you're talking about. But that piece of land in the middle, like, I don't even know what's up with it, but kind of glad to see it's kind of being turned into a park, even though it's extremely slow. And for the longest time, like I said, no one was doing anything about it. But the other thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about the governance side of it is the parking lots, right? And one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of the ways North American cities, and especially rural areas and suburbs, are designed. Well, I guess not rural. If it's actually really rural, then it's a whole different thing. But, cities and suburbs, you see a lot of parking lots with any type of building. The size of the parking lots are just absolutely huge, right? And that's because everything is so car dependent, car centric. Whenever you need to go to a place or in your car, so you need to build a place to park the cars, right? So I never really related that to urban forestry and planning for the green spaces in that sense. It's just because whenever I think of these type of stuff, I'm always more looking at the walkability side of things and that type of public space and people-friendly areas. But when you're talking about urban forestry, that totally connected the dots about how a lot of those spaces, it could also be used to design in a way that's more for people, could have a green space for people that is also extremely friendly, right? It's also very beneficial to a lot of neighborhoods, and it just kind of makes the city more beautiful as well. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people living in the area would just appreciate. And I could definitely see how there could be a lot of push against these type of developments because of how how much people just want to have parking lots. When the city's kind of designed in this way overall, if you're not going to have a massive parking lot, it's not going to be as attractive for people to go to, just because everyone is kind of set on driving there, right? But I guess in the city, for a lot of places, it's maybe a little bit easier, especially in Vancouver, since overall the downtown area or Kitsilano area, there are different places where it is more walkable and places that doesn't necessarily need the parking lots as much. So I'm really glad that people are talking about like urban forestry and planning for green spaces around the city instead of these other type of developments.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting that you brought that up. Because like it's something that's been talked about a lot in my courses. I took specifically a few geography courses last year, a few human geography ones, and we talked a lot about the way that European cities are designed versus North American cities. And if like you notice, like one of the biggest differences that I think a lot of people notice is that like European cities are just so much more walkable. Like like they weren't designed like when cars were like a big thing, you know? And like, for example, if you look at LA, it's like basically impossible to live there without a car and be able to get around comfortably, you know? It's just like, it's like a really big thing. And it's like a pressing issue just because like, I think it's not a sustainable way to be living in like cities that are just made for cars, you know, like both like for the space that it takes up, you know, like building like massive roads and highways and like obviously like parking lots for that. And then also like all the emissions from the cars, that's just like it's not environmentally very sound, and like it's not sustainable in the long run. And so one of the new ways that like urban planners are approaching it is like this new way. Sorry, I stumble on my words a bit just because it's like I'm a bit nervous, but
no, it's all good.
No, it's all
yeah,
good.
it's all good. Yeah. But it's this new city design concept called New Urbanism, and it's basically all centered about like walkable cities. And I think UBC was actually designed with this in mind, if I'm not wrong. I remember one of my professors mentioning it, but basically it's just like I think like the main like goal behind it was to have everything within like with your house like a 15-minute walking distance between you and whatever you need. So like grocery stores, you know, I guess like everything else like that you need besides groceries, like I don't know, hair salons.
Just basic amenities.
Yeah, like basic
cafes,
amenities. Yeah, like
gyms, restaurants. Just all. Yeah. And that's a topic that we've covered before because I'm very interested in spaces, environments of people living overall. And we did an episode on urban planning, which is a major aspect of spaces, environments, right? And one thing Lorenzo and I were talking about is that concept of walkable cities, you know, having everything within 15 minutes. And we definitely see that in North America, one of the places that you do find that being available is college campuses, university campuses. You know, it's just a large area designed with that concept in mind, where students can actually get to their classes and get, you know, their basic day-to-day things done, you know, quite conveniently without using cars and all that. And the other thing that we really wanted to touch on, based on what you're saying, is I talk a lot and think a lot about urban planning and the walkable city ideas, but I never really focused too much on the sustainability and the environmental aspect and those benefits that come with it, even though I do know that they exist. It's just that's not really the aspect I focus on. I kind of focus on the other aspects related to quality of life and convenience and mental health and just ways that improve people's day-to-day kind of sense of fulfillment and just how they feel their life is being in that environment, you know, actually.
I think it just really improves your general quality of life. Yeah.
But the sustainability and the environmental aspects are very important to talk about, and tying that in with urban forestry is definitely something that makes sense, because you have to look at, like, if everyone is driving, if everyone needs a car, like, you're taking all the spaces, building it for parking lots, building all these big roads, you're with all the emissions like you're talking about, and also just taking that space away from natural life, you know, from these green spaces as well. And I'm glad that we're bringing that up now, because that's one aspect that we didn't cover on the other episode.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
just
That's
like
important.
one thing that reminded me of is one of the really cool ways that we're trying to like obviously like the way that cities are built, it's like really hard to change what's already there. And for like a really like heavily industrialized area, a lot of the times it's like hard to bring green space back into it and like and you know like make it like more walkable again, because like if it was previously industrialized, then I guess maybe people don't really want to walk through there just because it wasn't really made for that or designed for it. But one of the concepts that we just talked about recently in one of my classes was like regreening these like things that were previously built. So for example, like one common way to do this is like to build greenways. And like for example, one of the most common ones is like just to like for example like train tracks that like used to run through cities that aren't currently being used anymore. A lot of the times they're turned into greenways which people can walk through or bike through, and they're turned into like these like parks so that people can like basically it just kind of creates like a way that people can move through the city in a more pedestrian friendly way, and they can be immersed in like more green space in that way as well without like having to like do too much to the environment just because you're kind of using what's already there. You're just like adding more plants or like, you know, making it like, you know, paving it so like bikes can go on it. But yeah, it's just like a very like I think it's like a good way to look at the cities and like a good way to fix what's wrong with the cities in North America and like try to make them more pedestrian friendly.
For sure.
That's a
And
pretty
one
cool
of the
idea.
things that I just come to my mind right off the bat, but isn't something I want to talk about right away, is kind of what Paris is trying to do, and that whole project. Well, I guess it's really a bunch of mini projects built in together, right? Because you kind of need to make all these small changes to get there. But before I really get into that, I just kind of want to touch on what you're talking about earlier and tying into what you just said now about European cities and the way they're built. And one thing that I've brought up before, again, with Lorenzo in the urban planning episode, is how here in North America, one of the reasons why it's built like the way it is now is largely because of the influence and lobbying and overall power of automobile and fossil fuel companies, right? If you look at some of the legislative policies that were passed, you look at some of the decisions that were made and who was involved, and you look at the laws that were broken and how much they were fined, which is extremely little, and you could clearly, very, very clearly see that it was kind of manipulated into this direction. And a lot of that has to do with GM, right? I remember hearing a story about them literally buying streetcars and getting rid of them so they don't have that competition. So the roads belong to cars and cars only in all these cities, literally buying that and getting rid of it. Like, it's just ridiculous, some of the things that they did. But with this whole thing, a lot of the way it came about was kind of in the post-war era, right? When stuff, when economy was getting good and people had more money and all that. And also a time when many cities, the living condition just wasn't as good, and there were very obvious problems, and people wanted to live kind of outside of it. You saw these developments come about that way in that era. And in Europe, there were a lot of reconstruction and renewal and all of that being done, and expansions being done as well in the post-war too. And there are cities that kind of took it towards a similar direction as North American cities as well. And we've seen some of those places much early on in the 60s and 70s, as well as all the way up to now, turning it back into more walkable. So not only were a lot of the cities just older and designing it pure without cars, but many of them had the realization and have been doing or has done what you talked about, and that is regreening the place, that is kind of changing these things to make it more walkable and make it more people friendly and making it more sustainable and environmental places, you know. in many Dutch cities, they had a lot of spaces that had more cars, and nowadays you look at the transformation, it's a completely, pedestrian zone with some really sophisticated bike infrastructure as well. And you also do see green spaces too, for sure. I just never really focused on that aspect, but thinking about it, yeah, absolutely, there is that. But that has continued it more in, I guess, European cities, even nowadays. And like I said, Paris and the project they have been doing is absolutely fantastic. And I don't know how much you know about that, but if you know anything,
I'm not really too sure about like what Paris is currently doing. I just know that like in the past, like Paris and like I know a few other cities in I think the UK had like a big influence on urban forestry and like how it started. Just because like I think they like from the big get-go, like they had like a really big interest in like having greenery in their cities. Like if you notice, like a lot of like the like in their palaces and like the more rich areas, like that's where they had like a lot of greenery because like it was like more of like a commodity for the rich people, and like rich people obviously have like a lot of the power like historically. So like I just know that like they were kind of like pioneering a lot of like the urban forestry like concepts that are like well known today. But like I don't really know what's going on right now.
Okay.
Once again, the French being trendsetters. That's crazy. That's wild.
Yeah. But like the new mayor really has come out and made some pretty radical plans, and so much of it has already been implemented or in the works. So you're definitely seeing the bike infrastructure improving a lot. You are seeing, I don't know how much is being done now, but the redesign of Champs-Élysées, like the most famous street potentially in the world, and one of the key tourist destinations in Paris, is being redesigned into a much greener and much more pedestrian space. And also a lot of areas have cars just straight up banned, right? Then you also have streets where parking has been eliminated. They're doing all these different things to eliminate the use of cars and to incorporate just more people-friendly spaces in terms of biking and walking, and also having a huge focus on urban forestry and making the place more green and more sustainable. And I don't know which part of it is going to get implemented when, but I do know a lot of it has already been done and a lot of it is being in the works. And this whole project is really radical, and overall what they're trying to do is very drastic, and they're trying to do it in a very short period of time. I think by 2026 or something like that, they're trying to, get most of the major things done. And you look at what it's looking at before it started, what's looking at now, and where they're trying to get to. It is a huge change. And I think for urban planning, for urban forestry, and the overall city design, it just really it is gonna be a trend setting and a case study for many cities to come.
Yeah, I think
I had no idea about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think like with urban forestry, I think heading into the future, I think a big thing of it will be redesigning previously built spaces, just because like you can't really just like knock down an entire like building or like a street and like completely like change it from what it originally was. So I think a big part of
just ask Putin, bro. Come on, bro.
Bro.
Well, I guess like in the context of like urban forestry, I think it's like both like economically and like I think you'd get like a lot of more support from the public if you were to redesign spaces as to like implementing like completely new ones. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely seen some streets or even highways being changed into pedestrian and bike only spaces, and those changes are definitely much easier to implement than trying to the repurposing these things are definitely much easier than just destroying and rebuilding stuff, right? And we're also seeing kind of smaller scale new cities that are being planned take these ideas more close to heart in places like the German-speaking world, like Germany, like Austria, and
The German-speaking
Switzerland.
world, so just Germany.
Nah, Austria,
Right? Pretty
Switzerland.
much. I mean, Austria. Oh, come on, bro. Those don't count, bro. Come on, dog.
Are you kidding me?
Switzerland does not count.
Bruh,
I mean, it kind of
they
counts,
count.
but it's not the main language, bro. Come on, bro.
Is it?
No.
They have three
isn't it French?
official languages.
They have three.
Yeah,
They got French, German, and
Italian is pretty, it's
Italian's probably
small
like the least.
population. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Romansh is also official language. English might even be an official language. I forget whether French or German is a primary one.
Yeah. I'll give you Austria,
like,
though. I'll give you Austria.
They have different areas. Yeah. And then Vienna is incredibly well-designed city with incredibly high quality of life. And what they're doing, urban planning overall has been great. I don't know too much about specifically to do with urban forestry, but what I was talking about is in German-speaking world, those countries, what you've been seeing is some of the new cities, some of these projects take that really close to mind and designing very green spaces, very walkable spaces. So I definitely agree with you in the sense of like, yeah, it's gonna be a lot of repurposing. That's gonna be a major part of urban forestry and urban planning overall. But also these new places that are getting built, these ideas are being really taken seriously and considered, and people even in North America are being more mindful of it. We've seen a lot of places during the pandemic times where they just close off the street from cars, and some of them are staying that way because people realize how much better it is for their neighborhoods, and having places where people can socialize, where kids can play, where you could just go out for a nice walk and enjoy the space like that, as opposed to having cars running across and the noise pollution, the emissions, the car accidents that ends up happening a lot actually. And that's definitely a really good way to think about it, the repurposing of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how you brought up COVID and how that affected like a lot of like urban planning and like zoning things, just because before COVID my professor mentioned that like there wasn't that much interest in urban forestry, and not like from the general public, I guess. But after, like, the lockdowns happened and people were like, oh, we can't really go anywhere. The only place they could really go was just to, like, outdoor public spaces. They started to realize, like, the importance of, like, having those be, like, accessible. And, like, having them, like, be, like, well-designed and, like, yeah, just accessibility is, like, a big issue. Just because, like you said, it's kind of ties into, like, how, like, the cities aren't walkable, because like what's the point of having a park if you have to like, I mean, obviously like driving to a park is nice, but like having a park where you can walk to is just so much like better. Like, and there's like lots of studies that support this, that people just use parks more if they live close to them and can actually walk to them. I believe that like the perfect distance to live from a park is like around 300 meters, and like that's like the kind of like the golden number for people to actually use it and like have it be considered accessible. I believe it's like you should have like at least 3 green spaces 300 meters away from your house is like what urban planners like try to like design.
Sheesh.
But like obviously I don't think
it's
like in
radical.
reality that happens or has happened in the past, but I guess moving forward like that's what they're trying to aim for. But yeah, COVID just like made the general public really realize like, oh, it's really important to have green spaces in urban settings, because obviously you can drive out like an hour or two and go on a hike on a mountain, but just like it's so important to just have like those like small little like times in the day, like for 15 minutes you just go out to a park and like get some fresh air and then go back to your apartment or whatever and continue working. Like that's just like really important, and I don't think people realize that until COVID happened.
Yeah, just having that to be incorporated into everyday life as opposed to be a special event and special activity where you really go out, because taking a drive into the mountains and enjoying nature that way for hikes and whatnot, it's extremely nice for a lot of people, but that isn't necessarily a everyday event, and it's not going to be everyday event for the average person. And what were you going to bring up, Lorenzo?
Man, that reminds me of during lockdown, me and Shari were planning a hike. He's like, oh, yeah, we'll find something. Yeah, we'll find something to hike on the day or whatever, something like that. And then we wanted to do it in South Surrey, and we're looking, and I was like, there's nothing in South Surrey. There's nothing. I mean, I guess we wanted to do a hike like on a mountain. And there's no mountains in South Surrey, so that might be an issue. But beyond that, we were shocked. There was like no good walks at all. Like it was just like, what's it called? Blackie Spit Park or whatever, something like that. Yeah, it's high.
I mean, there are some
Bird Sanctuary.
places.
Been there like a million times. Yeah,
there are places like around Stemiamu, and then like closer to kind of going down to the beach. There are places around our old high school that's kind of nice, but those aren't very long. Yeah. And also overall,
yeah, exactly.
The quality.
And if he was gonna come all the way up from Abbotsford, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
so
but
never mind.
We used to go on walks during COVID time in our neighborhood when I was back during the summer.
But that was just so easy though because you live so close. If Shari was gonna come out all the way here, we can't do those walks if he's putting in all that effort. You know what I mean?
No. I would just bring up how like during COVID times that like, for the average person, the time they spend outside and just walking and having that as activity has definitely increased dramatically. And I could definitely see how that would raise awareness for urban forestry and the way cities are designed overall. And when you're talking about that, I was just thinking about how if you have pets, right? Like, just take them out for a walk in a nice green space. Like that's something that's just really nice. And if you have to actually get in a car and drive to a space like that changes the whole scenario, right? It's just a very different feeling to it. And it literally increases space. Not just like, yes, it literally increases space physically, but mentally it becomes a different concept. It becomes a different activity. And it's not just getting out of your house and you're already basically doing the activity, right? Because if you're really close to the walk and you're going to walk there anyways, that's kind of part of the activity. Whereas if you have to get in the car and drive for like, even if it's a short drive, even if it's like a 10-minute drive, you're still getting out, getting into the car, driving there, parking, and then starting the activity, right? So there's like this extra step. So not only physical distance, but this extra step thing there changes the concept and feels more distant from you from kind of a mental aspect, right? That's what I think, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I think accessibility is not just distance. It's also
100%.
just how easily you can access that space. And definitely driving out adds like a lot of just extra factors into it that might just be too much trouble for people to like actually go ahead and go through with it.
Yeah. Okay, now hold on a second. I'm really interested about this tree situation you're talking about and like the native versus non-native species debate. Oh. What's your stance on the topic? If you were going to plant a tree today, what would it be?
Oh, see, that's like actually really tricky because like, here's the thing. If you plant native species, like that's awesome because you're conserving like the ecological integrity of the space. And, that's ideal. And like, if we can like, prevent climate change from happening, like obviously that's like what we want. But like in the grand scheme of things, we probably just have to like start planning for like those changes, not just like hoping that they won't happen. And the big issue with that is that you are using like tax payers' money for planting those trees. And if you plant a bunch of trees and they all die within 10 to 15 years from now, 10 to 20 years from now, like you just kind of like wasted a bunch of money. And like, obviously people aren't going to be happy about that. And then also like, even if you plant like non-native species, it doesn't mean like that they're horrible. Like they're still providing like a lot of like ecological like services. it's just like not native, which like is like not the best. But if those are gonna survive, then you're not really wasting that tax money, and it would be better just because like you're actually gonna have trees that are alive. But then like the native species might suffer if they have to compete with that. But then again, they might die in the first place if there's climate change. So it's just kind of like there's no right answer to it. You just really have to like just kind of look at all the pros and cons and decide. I guess like the city planners or the people that are currently making those decisions, they'd have to like sit down and like look at what would make the most sense in the long term. So
what did you say the timeline was before we get to San Diego temperatures
2050
or whatever?
So
San Diego
like,
climate?
Yeah, it's pretty...
2050. Okay, so what's going to happen to all the super old trees from today? Are they all... Like, how many of the species are going to... Is going to be, like, complete annihilation of the native species soon after 2050? Or is it going to be, like, a slow dwindling where it's, like, the numbers just start decreasing and they start getting outcompeted
the thing
slowly?
is, like, each species has, like, different tolerances, you know? So, like, I guess, like, it just kind of depends on each individual species itself and, like, what they can tolerate specifically.
What about the super big trees? The real cool looking ones, you know, the ones.
Well, yeah, like I guess again it depends.
See, because I feel like anytime I think of trees from around here, that's where my mind jumps to, you know.
I know, like for example, like sequoias, like they're commonly found in like California. They're also like found up here, so like maybe hopefully those could survive. I'm not quite sure about like other native species though. It's just like I think like obviously like, San Diego's pretty hot and like dry. Yeah. And so that would be stressing a lot of like the native plants here. Like for example, what happens like when species are stressed like that, like sometimes they can survive, but then they can't like continue doing other like other parts of like their like I don't know how to describe this, but like they can't like do all their functions. So for example, in like Vancouver, I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's like a bunch of palm trees, and obviously those aren't native, and they survive even though this isn't like a place where they're native to. But if you look at them, they actually don't produce any like coconuts or seeds, and that's because they're actually pretty stressed, and they're like at the bottom end of their tolerance for like the temperature. So for example, like I'm not 100% sure if like something like that would happen to the native species for like hot temperatures, but I can imagine that they wouldn't be able to start like doing like all their functions, for example, like creating like maybe fruits or like
I see this as an absolute win.
Or like, but like if they can't produce seeds though,
we're gonna have
if
coconuts,
they can't produce
bro.
seeds, like how would they produce more trees? That's the thing. So like
No, but hold on. But we're gonna have coconuts then by 2050. Is that what you're telling me?
Maybe.
That's what I'm getting from this.
That is a potential, I guess. But you bring up a very interesting point. Because when I think about this kind of idea of native versus what do you call it, foreign species? Like what were you calling it?
People call them like non-native, like because like not necessarily like, all of them aren't necessarily invasive. They're just like not native. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like in Vancouver, like you talk about one example, but Vancouver is famous for the sakura trees, the cherry blossom trees, right? And I think that was a gift from Japan or something, but it's huge in Vancouver now, right? And that's non-native here. It's been introduced and it's everywhere, and it's a huge feature of the city. And you also see this same kind of idea in Nice, for example, Nice, France. They have palm trees kind of close to the Mediterranean coastal area, right? And those are definitely not native either, but they're also kind of a very well-known feature of the city, and they obviously did it for making it look nice for tourist attractions and whatnot. But you definitely see many examples of the cities introducing non-native species and it working out, at least somewhat working out. Like you said, there's stress levels on the trees that they could handle. So it definitely makes it a more interesting argument when you consider these aspects as well, because it's just, some trees are just really nice, and I think a lot of people here in the city would like it if it works. So even if like climate change isn't happening, you're going to introduce non-native trees like they've done with the sakura trees. Like, is that necessarily a bad idea? Because it's been done before and people like it and it's been successful, right? And when you do consider, you do consider this aspect on top of the climate change that is happening. And I personally kind of like the argument for shifting and kind of adapting slowly and gradually towards it. I feel like that makes sense, and I don't really see too much harm in that. Like I favor that argument more. Like, what do you think about that?
I'm just gonna bring like a little example of a few weeks ago, for one of my classes, we went out to a park and we were like analyzing like the design and like the tree planting choices of the park, and there's some katsura trees that were planted right beside a playground, and then there were also some western red cedars like in the background. And we were just talking about like, oh, why would they opt to choose like katsura trees over like another native species, and like why would they keep the western red cedars over like getting rid of them and like planting something that would like something non-native. And I believe that this is like, maybe I don't know if this is 100% correct, but my professor said that, for example, in the western red cedar, you would see over 50 different species that rely on that tree for like habitat or food or whatever, and those are native species. Whereas the katsura tree, if you were to look at it, I think there's only like two or three native species that like actually use that for like resources and like as a habitat. So like the ecological integrity is definitely like a big thing that's affected when you choose to plant non-native species, even though they could survive and like be better in like terms of climate change. Like a lot of like the native species that aren't like plants, like the actual like animals, they would suffer just because like they'd be losing their habitats, right? So like that's like another thing to consider. And like like I said, it's like there's no one clear answer of like what's better to do, like planting non-native versus native. And I think it's just like it depends, it varies a lot, and it depends case by case. I don't think there's like one right answer, and it just depends on what the intended use of the space is and what you want out of it. So
yeah, no, like I wasn't really thinking about the chain reaction and the indirect effects that it will have, but yeah, that definitely makes it much more complicated and hard to figure out. The other thing I wanted to ask you was kind of about Vancouver. Like overall, what do you think about urban planning in Vancouver?
Actually, Vancouver has done a pretty good job. I believe it won like an award for like the greenest city. I don't remember if that was like in North America or just in like general over the world, but Vancouver's actually done a really good job in terms of accessibility and maintaining like green spaces in urban settings. Like if you notice, like a lot of international students, I've heard them talk in my classes, and they're like shocked to see like all like the like nature and like in Vancouver, and like how it's so accessible, and like
that must be such a culture shock depending on where they came from.
We went on a hike in one of my classes, like through like Pacific Spirit Park, which is like located in BC, but basically has like these really big tall trees, and people like from other countries and like even other places in Canada, they were just shocked. They're like, it's crazy how much like nature has been preserved in such like an urbanized sort of space. So yeah, Vancouver's like actually done a pretty good job. Like obviously there's like room to improve still, but like I think it's like overall done like an exceptional job at maintaining like green spaces and like designing spaces to keep them. Yeah,
I definitely agree. I don't know about you, Lorenzo, but I think Vancouver, actual Vancouver, whether that is downtown or
Like downtown
more
Vancouver?
more kind of close.
Or
But
Great
the
Vancouver?
actual Vancouver, not like Metro Vancouver overall, not like all the other cities within Greater Vancouver area, but actual the
But like
Vancouver
Vancouver,
area,
Vancouver.
Vancouver, and those areas. I think
Yeah, that's
I
really
think are
walkable.
great with Stanley Park obviously being there, with
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
coastal part incorporating the waterfront with the parks that's there. I'm a big fan of Kitsilano, that whole area. If I were to stay in Canada,
never
that's a
actually
place
been.
I will live for sure. There's no doubt about that. There's really not that many attractive options for me other than that. But I can
Damn,
definitely
bro,
see
high
it.
standards.
Listen, man, there aren't too many places in the world that I would say are actually, because like I could live in most places and it would be good. Like it wouldn't just be fine, it would be good. But for it to not only be great, but to be amazing, certain factors need to be met, and not that many places will
That's
meet
it.
it. And in Canada, kind of the best fitting would be Kitsilano. And even then, I would say that like current climate, it's a little bit too much rain and gloom for me currently. So
So give it a few years, bro. Give it
Yeah.
a few years.
yeah. But yeah, and even at UBC, you have the beach, you have gardens, you have parks, right? Like overall in that whole broad area, but not so broad that it's a Greater Vancouver area. I think there's just so much to it, and it's incredible how you have so much to it in such an urbanized space, right? Because you could go into kind of more. For example, Sunshine Coast, for example, North Vancouver, some of the places there, like a lot of those places are not nearly as urbanized, right? There isn't nearly as much of other things to it. It's much more nature focused and kind of and it definitely makes more sense for it to be like that. But to have everything that Vancouver as a city has, it's just incredible to see the way it's integrated into it and how everyone could actually enjoy these spaces. I just think about, Yaletown. You have a SkyTrain connecting you from Richmond. You could get off the airport within 30 minutes from the SkyTrain, get to Yaletown. In that area, you literally have everything. You have the waterfront. You have a nice, what's it called? David Alum Park, right? That's a pretty nice area. And they have all these restaurants, cafes, grocery stores. Like it's incredible. It's incredibly convenient and people friendly, and just you have green spaces, you have all these natural things that's being appreciated. And with Vancouver, the way it's designed overall, the skyline is designing a way that if you look from certain spots, you could see the mountains and whatnot. It's set, the regulation set, so buildings don't cover those things from these angles, right? Like it's really kept in mind about its natural environment around it. So I really like the way it's designed for sure as well.
Yeah, it's really it's a really unique city, like the way it's designed. Like all the parks are actually like gorgeous and like really well kept. Like with the exception of a few, but like yeah, they've done a really good job with it.
And if you were gonna
Speaking about
say,
Vancouver,
go ahead.
it is now 2:03
Oh, we can
p.m. in
continue, it's
Vancouver.
fine.
Just a heads up.
Yeah, I mean,
dope,
we could
dope,
just
dope.
finish off this topic and then kind of get into the highlights of the week segment. But I just wanted to ask you, as someone who actually learns about this and thinks about this, where would you say in Vancouver is kind of the best based on these factors in terms of accessible green spaces?
Let me think about that. I think there's actually like it's hard to say because I think there's like lots of different areas that are actually pretty good. Like you were saying, Kitsilano's like really nice because like the beach is like right there, as well as like there's like a lot of like trees and like greenery, just in the regular streets. downtown is actually surprisingly pretty good as well. Like the streets, they do have some trees, but then also Stanley Park itself is like, it's like a really like, it's like obviously it has been like altered slightly by like humans, and like it's not completely like untouched old growth or anything like that, but like it is like a really immersive experience walking through it, and you totally forget that you're like in the middle of like a city walking like in the actual forested area. So I think like the west end of downtown is actually pretty good for green space as well. There's also parks available as well, and lots of new developments. Even just like the other day, I was walking right by my bus stop and I saw a new like proposal for like a new greenway that they want to build. Not build, just like repurpose a street for it. So that was really interesting.
That's
And
pretty
like
good.
even like if you walk down the streets, like there's lots of little like signs sometimes like giving you info about like, oh, this street is designed to have like water runoff go through like the soil and like the trees, and the way that it's designed. Like this one street in Yaletown specifically is like designed for that, which is really cool. And like they tell the public about it, and like they spread awareness about like the importance of like having green spaces and trees in urban settings, which I think is like really good. So yeah, I think like downtown and Kitsilano are like they're really good for like accessibility and like design and all that.
What about other places in Greater Vancouver area? Because I think about, you know, our neighborhood, for example, like it's like Surrey is city of parks, right? And you do have some very nice parks in Surrey, but in our area, I can't really think of any really nice green spaces that you could just actually get to easily. Right,
Like,
and you have a
there's
lot of
some-
houses, a lot of people
some
live in there.
mediocre
Like
green
you would
spaces.
think,
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think when you start like going further away from like the actual like Vancouver center, it does get like it's not bad by any means. Like it's just not as accessible. Like yeah, like I only I'm like really like comfortable talking about like I guess like Surrey just because I've lived here. I don't really know too much about the other areas, so I can't really say too much about them. But like South Surrey specifically, it's all right. There's parks and like there's lots of new proposals for parks that I've seen. Not like lots, but I've seen like a few. And it could be better. The only issue is that there has been a lot of developments like in the past 10 years, and it has gotten rid of a lot of like the nature that was here before. I don't know if you've even noticed it, but like I remember back when I was in elementary school, like I went to this one called Sunnyside, and like just around it was like all trees like when I first went there, and there's like literally I'd see deer sometimes just like running around there, but like now it's all houses and developments, and they didn't leave like a lot of big green spaces, which is like it's like small green spaces are fine, but a lot of the time you just can't get all the same like benefits that you would from a larger one. So I think that that's something they could have planned better. They could have like tried to like I guess set aside a bigger area of green space for like the city, just considering because like there's a lot of people that live in this area now, and like accessibility is a big issue, and I don't know, they could have planned that better in my opinion. But yeah,
well,
That's
if
hilarious.
we're
My
gonna
headphones somehow ran out of battery.
if we're gonna get into that, like our area could be planned so much better in so many ways. Just in terms of school, like you knew that people gonna move in. How are you only gonna have these many schools? How are you building that many portables when a school is that new still? Like there were obvious lapse in judgments when they're planning the city overall. So it's not surprising that in terms of green spaces and urban forestry that there's some aspects that are clearly lacking too. I mean, also like with public transportation, like a lot of the people live in the area like complain about that. Just how infrequent it is, the lack of routes that are there. And for some people living really in kind of the I don't know, the deep of the suburb in the area, they have to walk out for quite a while just to take the bus. Right. And yeah, there's just so many aspects to the way that our area is designed that isn't accessible for people in many ways. Um, I would say if I were gonna pick a nicer kind of green space, easily accessible green space focused area closer to our area, it will probably be kind of close to where our high school is. I think over there you kind of have a little bit more to offer in terms of that. Our friend Caden Lorenzo, he lives right there, and from his house, some of the places you could walk to, it's pretty decent, right? Overall, it's still not a very walkable place. It's not very convenient for other things. Definitely still car centric. But in terms of urban forestry and green spaces, I will probably pick that area.
Yeah, like yeah, that area's like all right. There's some trails that are nice, and obviously like there's like all like the fields too that like by the rec center, which are really nice to have. But yeah, I find that like a lot of the new developments and like the where those are located, like I think the planning and like if you look at all of them as a whole together, like it just wasn't very well thought out. I don't think just because yeah, there isn't like any big like there's no like yeah, like I was saying earlier, there's just like no big like green spaces that people can go to. They're all like very small parks. I don't know if you've noticed, but like all the new like what are they called again? Like like housing complexes. Yeah, the housing complexes. Like their parks are tiny, and like if you look at the yards too, they're tiny. Like they're the tiniest little plots ever. So it's just like it's really kind of sad seeing how like moving forward, green space is becoming like increasingly inaccessible in this area specifically. But yeah, hopefully like as they continue like planning and like expanding this area, like they keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's hard just because how expensive land is here. Yeah, definitely hope that area, focuses more in that aspect. Yeah, it's really a lot to think about when it comes to this. And you're planning to, work in this field going forward?
Yeah, I'm still deciding whether I want to go into landscape architecture or urban design. Yeah, I'm still kind of going back and forth, but both seem pretty interesting. And like they're both related.
Your first year in this, you have plenty of time.
Yeah, I still have plenty of time. Yeah, I mean, I'm technically a second year, but like I already switched my mind. I already changed my major once, so I can change it again later if I need to. Or not major, I guess career choice.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think I definitely learned a lot about urban forestry and the ideas and different aspects of it. And also just a little bit more about, from a more educated perspective, how Vancouver is. And it's cool that it matches up with my perception of it. But yeah, no, that was awesome. I'm really glad to have you on here. I think people really benefit from hearing this topic. I don't think it's something that people talk a lot about, especially here, I feel like in North America. And to end the episode, we'll do a segment called Highlight of the Week, where we talk about, the highlights of our past week. So I don't know if either of you want to start.
Definitely sleeping in this morning. No, but other than that, it's been a pretty regular week for me. It's been chilling. Not much. So honestly, to be honest, I do think the highlight is just sleeping in, to be honest.
Nice. That's fair.
Let me think. I totally forgot what I did this week. What did I do? I mean, I don't really think I got to anything.
You went on this cool
crazy.
podcast,
I got sushi
bro.
last night, so that was really, I love that. So
Nice.
yeah, I guess that was the highlight of my week.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, it's always nice to get some good food.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. I've actually got a pretty big highlight, something that I did not reveal to Lorenzo when he asked me how my week was before the episode started. But yesterday I received news that I was accepted into my master's program.
Yo, congrats, homie, congrats.
Thank you very much. So
That's
I'll
actually
be
so
coming.
Wait, what is it again?
Honestly. So I'll be coming back here in
what's the program called?
September in the program called Master of Media in Journalism and Communications. And it's a 1-year program, 3 terms, with the last term being co-op / internship / just actual real life practical experience. And there's going to be, supposedly various opportunities available for that part. And also there's some flexibility in terms of course selection, because there's some stuff you have to learn for sure, but I think you kind of have more freedom in kind of choosing which aspect to kind of go into a little bit deeper, to kind of specialize, to learn more about, which is just awesome. And obviously it's something that is very different from because I'm graduating. Well, I'm finishing this semester and then I'll be graduating. So literally I have a month of classes and then just final projects and exams, and I'll be done. And they just have to do their whole thing. And in June, I'll get my graduation status, and I'll be graduating with a Bachelor in Medical Sciences, with my program actually being honor specialization in biochemistry and cell biology, and majoring in Italian language and culture. So this master's program is obviously going to be very different than what I have been doing in terms of my academic journey so far in university, but it's going to be something very interesting for sure, something I'm looking forward to. And receiving the news this early is fantastic for planning ahead in terms of I got plane tickets to come back April 25th. I'll be back for the entire summer, and it's going to be great because I don't have any serious obligations and commitments where I do have projects I'm gonna work on.
Oh, that's gonna be hype.
But yeah, no summer school, no research projects, not working, maybe a little bit at the restaurant, but not anything serious, right? So it's gonna be hype in that sense as well. So not only just receiving this news and getting in, which is really awesome, but receiving it this early allows me to, just get a lot of stuff sorted out and not having to wait for the last minute, especially having to figure out during exam season, which, supposedly they were gonna give out the decisions early April, which is the end of classes going into exam season. Then having to kind of sort stuff out at that point, it's just gonna be more of a hassle. So yeah, really exciting stuff, honestly. And I think this podcast, contributed to part of the reason I got in, for sure. It's a major media thing that we're doing on a weekly basis, and so ties into this podcast as well, I guess. But yeah, that's gonna be it from us this week, and I want to thank Raquel once again for joining us. It has been fantastic. And we'll be back next week for another episode of the Young Foolish podcast. Hopefully we'll have Raymond with us.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, for sure.